Welcome back, folks. Today we are doing a mid-season Dynasty Superflex startup mock draft. We're going to try to do this the best we can. There is no updated rankings in Sleeper, as you guys know, so I've assembled a mini dream team here to help me out along the way with members pulled from the Discord. If you're not already a member of the Dynasty Price Check Discord, please hop on over to my website, dynastypricecheck.com. That is linked on this profile and join up. It is entirely free and it is the best way to stay connected in the Dynasty community. Bounce off your trades and get involved in mock drafts all throughout the offseason as we spin up a bunch of real leagues this offseason as well. As I said here, I'm going to start this draft off, and the format for us today, as you're seeing on the screen here, is going to be a Dynasty Superflex PPR start 10 format with a tight end premium of 1.75. So not a super shallow format, but also not crazy deep. Somewhere nice in the middle to hopefully cater to all of your Dynasty needs. We are going to go ahead and click Start Draft here, and I'm going to talk through a lot of these picks. I'm sure we're going to see some interesting ones here, and some people will fall to the wayside because the rankings are not completely perfect, but hopefully this will give us an accurate representation of where some of our heads are at mid-season. I do have two of my moderators in the chat with me that you guys will actually be able to hear as we go along here while I ask them a couple questions about their startup picks. And so just keep in mind, you'll get a little extra commentary besides just mine today. So we're going to go ahead and start this draft up. And here we go. This is a Superflex league, remember? So we are going to get quarterbacks off the board pretty quick, I would assume. And Drake May is going to go 101. As you guys can already tell, the landscape in Dynasty is shifting rapidly. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Drake May are probably going to be your top three picks in order this offseason. That is going to be quite interesting. And so here you go. You've got Lamar Jackson going at the 1-3. Not surprising. I personally would still be taking Josh Allen 101 and Lamar Jackson 102. But I do think there's no issue in swinging and reaching on your young guy. A lot of people did with Jaden Daniels this previous offseason. And this year, I think Drake May is going to be the guy. So there, Jamar Chase goes to the 104. Not too surprising. Not too surprising there. Obviously, next we're going to have a couple of CPU picks. So I'm going to go ahead and let them auto pick here. And hopefully this doesn't mess us up too much, but I think that'll be fine. There you go. You get Justin Jefferson off the board probably earlier than he'd normally go, to be frank, guys. But you know what? For the sake of it, I'm just going to let it run. You got Puka Nacua go off the board at this point. And I think if you're me and you know me or anything about me, there's no way I'm going to let Jackson, Smith, and Jigba pass me by here. And that's exactly what I'm going to do is take JSN. I think, I like to go wide receiver heavy builds anyway, and getting my guy to fall to me here is pretty great. I see no issue taking him right after Puka in Dynasty. He is actually my Dynasty wide receiver 1 at this current time. All the Dynasty rankings are going to be posted to the Discord very shortly here, so if you guys have not already checked out my mid-season Dynasty rankings, you're going to want to hop on over there, and you'll get access to all of them. Now, next, you see Bijan Robinson go off the board. Still a great pick, especially at value here at the 110. You're getting one of the best running backs in the league. And this is going to be a third-round reversal draft, guys. So, I know hopefully a lot of you guys in Superflex are playing third-round reversal these days. I think it's the best way to do a startup draft and allows for the most equity in teams. Now, obviously, the real Dynasty startups probably be a lot of trading and moving around on the clock. So this one's going to be a little bit more standard. And again, this is a tight end premium league. So Trey McBride goes off the board here. Absolutely no issue with that pick. He has been an absolutely incredible asset to have this season. And now the Cardinals seem to be moving on from Kyler Murray. I think you're going to have, someone come in there that even like Jacoby Brissett, who's already been a lot more productive with Trey McBride. So then Jahmyr Gibbs and St. Brown go. I have absolutely no problem with these picks. Obviously, Gibbs speaks for himself, and St. Brown is so consistent. People get bored with consistency in Dynasty, but St. Brown currently wide receiver 5 in the midseason, and he was wide receiver 3 last year. At this point, you see Malik Neighbors go off the board. I'm not surprised by that. I think that's totally good value on Malik Neighbors here. At this point, he's going to be coming back from the injury. Things are looking definitely more exciting with Jackson Dart now landing in New York. That's going to be interesting to see where Jackson Dart goes in this startup, as I do expect him to be taken pretty early these days. I'm actually going to put him in the queue here. Now, again, I might even miss some of my guys based off this queue, but I am going to do the best I can for you guys. So Justin Herbert's going to go off the board here, and I think that's a great pick. To be completely frank, I think I am going to go the running back route and just build a nice little balanced team here. And one of the first running backs off the board for me, I think undeniably is going to be Devon Achane. And I know Ashton Genty's out there, but I'm going to take Achane here. And I feel fine about it. So Brock Bowers goes off the board next. Falls a bit further than he used to in some of these. So now I'm gonna let CPU kind of deal with some of these. So we're gonna get Jalen Hurts go off the board, and then we'll get Ashton Genty or Brian Thomas, and then probably Ashton Genty right there. So there you go. I know Brian Thomas has had a bit of a down year, and him going in front of CeeDee Lamb is definitely not realistic, unfortunately. But that's what you get when you have a little bit of CPU auto pick in here. But like I said, guys, we're going to try to keep this as realistic as possible for you, and I think it'll still be a great reference point based off that most of these guys are real players and active Dynasty users from a lot of my listener leagues. So they know what they're doing, and they know how to build a team. So this should be totally fine still. I think at this point you got Drake London going off the board. I think great value to get Drake London at the end of the second round here. I probably honestly would have considered taking Drake London where I took Devon Achane there. Now here's a big riser from last year. Rashee Rice goes off the board at the 211. Not surprised. It's probably valid and worth the pick. And Tyler Warren's going to go 212. I mean, again, fantastic rookie season lining up for Tyler Warren. It looks like Danny Dimes is crazy enough the real deal here. And so, that's good looking right there to get Tyler Warren at the end of the second round. Now, at this point, Kahuna's probably going to decide, does he want to take his first quarterback? Does he want to go running back here? I think regardless of how you're looking at it, you can't lose too much. There's got a lot of guys I really like on the board here. Personally, I'd probably be looking to see what I was thinking. Jonathan Taylor might fall to me. So there you go. Jonathan Taylor goes off the board. Not surprised by that one after probably guaranteed to be finishing running back 1 at the end of this season unless McCaffrey explodes through the last few weeks here. I think that is an incredible value pick there. Now I'll be curious to see where some other of these big risers come into play, right? Guys like, like Amarian Hampton, who we just see go off the board, who has had a great rookie campaign here despite the injury. I'd be curious to see potentially where Buka decides to go off the board, if that's going to be anytime soon. Even looking at the quarterback landscape, so Tetairoa McMillan's going to go off the board here, and to be completely frank, I normally don't take quarterbacks this early on. I'm pretty tempted to take Patrick Mahomes here. I do think Patrick Mahomes is really finding his way back to kind of his best here, and pretty damn good value to get Mahomes here. I normally don't do it, and I'd be pretty remiss not to take Ashton Genty here at this value, not Ashton Genty's already off the board, to take maybe a wide receiver here, maybe like a Nico Collins who's fallen a bit after this season, or maybe an Ibuka here, even considering like a guy like George Pickens who's risen way up draft boards, Ladd McConkey, Garrett Wilson. Regardless, I do think I got to just play it smart here, and I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes in a super flex. I think getting Mahomes at the 3-4 is almost very disrespectful to the man. He's currently a top 5 quarterback playing this year and doesn't look like he's going to be slowing down. I love the build so far with JSN, Devon Achane, and Patrick Mahomes. Now, Ibuka goes off the board. I wasn't surprised. I did expect Ibuka to go pretty quickly here, and I've actually seen a lot of people take Ibuka over Tet. Luckily, these listeners are a bit more in my camp here, and as they know me well, I do have Tetairoa McMillan ranked higher than Ibuka, regardless of how it's looked during the freshman campaign. I do think Ibuka is still very, very talented, but I think Tet's upside is just a bit higher. So there we go. I'm going to let these go auto pick here, and, that's pretty realistic. Bucky Irving, Nico Collins, and Lad McConkey go off the board here. And so at this point, you've got, a lot of receivers starting to run. I'm not surprised by it, but Garrett Wilson is still available here, so I would imagine that's where he goes. But he actually takes his first quarterback, and that's a great value here. Again, Bo Nix at the 3-9. There's a lot of quarterbacks on the board still here, so definitely be interested to see when QBs start running as we wrap this board around. But still a lot of good guys on the board. So that Quinshon Judkins goes to the 3-10. I think that's a great move. If Judkins would have made it all the way back to me, I would have been taking him, but that was probably never going to happen. Then Garrett Wilson goes at the end of the third. I think that's very good value on Garrett Wilson here. I was taking him in the early third round of startup drafts this season and was totally comfortable with it. After a down year for the Jets, injury-ridden for sure, not to mention also just another terrible year of quarterback play. Seems to be a very, very consistent pattern for New York, but who knows? Maybe they trade up next year and end up taking Mendoza, or they get Dante Moore or somebody, that gets them excited for a future outlook here. So, Walsh is going to come up here and take Travion Henderson and James Cook, and he's got a really nice looking build going right now. This is actually a team that I like so far in this format. Again, this is a tight end premium format, so he gets Tyler Warren early. Henderson, James Cook shears up that running back room. Then we get Roma Dunze off the board, and that's a good shout here. I think there's still a lot of polarization on Roma Dunze in the Dynasty landscape. I think some people are totally bought in. Some people are more on the other end of it, and they even prefer guys like Luther Burden in that offense long term. I personally am still a big Roma Dunze guy. I would have taken Chris Olave ahead of him, but I still really like him. I think he's a great prospect, and I've been following him since University of Washington days and been very thrilled about it. Now, on top of that, we've got some others going off the board with Saquon Barkley at the 4-4. I think that's pretty incredible value for Barkley here. He's one of those guys that kind of like Jonathan Taylor last year fell into the 4th round, and I think is just a steal at that value. So there the CPU is going to do its thing. Marvin Harrison, Breece Hall, and CJ Stroud. Now, Jackson Dart goes off the board. That's such a bummer. Jack knows me well, and that was actually going to be my next pick. So Jack sniped me a little bit, but no worries. We're going to pivot on the spot here. Still got some quarterbacks available on the board here that I don't mind taking a swing at, like Caleb Williams, or, looking at the running back room here. You still got guys like Kyron that are on the board. Josh Jacobs is on the board. You've got some upside here. In the wide receiver department, not a lot of guys I love reaching on, to be completely frank with you. Now, taking a guy like George Pickens here probably isn't a bad value, but I still find myself hard-pressed to do it. In this format, you'd probably be interested to consider taking tight end here, but, I think, quite frankly, I'm going to take Kyron Williams here. It doesn't feel fantastic, but I am going to do it. I still think you get good value on a guy who signed an extension this year and is still giving you a top 10 production. So not really my favorite pick for this position I was put in. I was hoping that Jackson Dart would fall to me, but you know what? Jack, that's a big brain move right there, and he gets a great guy out of it. Now, this is going to be an interesting turn to see where some of these wide receivers start falling. Now, there's definitely been, some movement in the wide receiver department with Ibuka and Tet being the biggest risers here in the Dynasty community, but outside of that, we haven't seen too much movement in this middle range. Now, Tucker Kraft goes off the board there, and I think that's a good pick. I definitely considered it coming off the knee injury, going with Kraft there. Having an elite tight end in this format is very important, so I don't think it's a bad move to be looking at the tight end position pretty soon here. All that being considered, you still got guys like A.J. Brown, who's going to fall a lot in this draft, I would guess, that's on the board, and some other guys that I think, might be late risers, like Jaden Higgins on the back half of this season. If he continues with a positive performance here, could be getting some great production out of him in the coming weeks, and he might rise up off the draft boards a bit. He's a guy I like to stash in those middle rounds. I think, George Pickens, there you go. He goes off the board there. Probably would have been my pick if he had wrapped back around to me, but no issues with that. There's still plenty of guys on the board I like here. So I'll be curious too when we talk about rising running backs. I'm curious to see where Javonte Williams goes here. Obviously, we're doing this as a midseason, so going to be hard to go too crazy onto the Javonte Williams train without a contract. But you know what? All good. There's still great guys out here though, like CMC and Josh Jacobs. And I think as you've seen here, I don't think Christian McCaffrey is slowing down next year. I think you're still going to get a top season out of him. So if you're going to be in any sort of realm of contention, I still think Christian McCaffrey is a 5th round startup pick for Dynasty. And I know a lot of people disagree with that, but there's simply no substitute for production. So we'll see what Big Kahuna is going to do here. Hopefully he's gassing up his back-to-back picks pretty quick here, and we'll keep this one moving. But we've got some folks, like I said, some of my moderators in the chat. So Mikey takes George Pickens there. I'm gonna hand it over to him for a minute. Mikey, why don't you talk me through that pick a little bit and what you were debating and why you decided to go with George Pickens, wide receiver there?
I was honestly really in a kind of a bad situation. Um, I I was gonna take a running back, but the fact that Big Kahuna took 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds, I wanted to hold off on taking another running back. And I already took my tight end one, Trey McBride, and I wasn't really in love with any of the wide receivers still on the board. I was debating between Devontae Smith and George Pickens. The main reason I picked George Pickens is purely because of age. I do think Devontae Smith has a better chance of being a wide receiver one on the team next season, but purely because of age.
Yeah. No, I could see it, and I agree with you. I think my picks around this range would be the George Pickens, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, that realm of wide receivers. So wide receiver 2 guys with upside. And there you go. Mikey getting, he has a really young, great build right now, and that looks like the perfect time to take a Christian McCaffrey. And he does. And to be completely frank, I couldn't love that pick more for Mikey's build right now. And if you guys are watching out there and wondering, how do I crush a Dynasty startup? So far, I'm loving a build like this. You've got Trey McBride, Malik Neighbors, George Pickens as a very solid wide receiver 2 with upside. He gets the young running back in Hampton, and then follows it back up with CMC to really capitalize on a win now move. So I personally love that. At this point, there's still a lot of good wide receivers on the board with Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle and other folks. So let's see where Swaggy goes with this one here. But he's coming off already having Robinson and Herbert and Tet and Tucker Kraft, and then I'm one pick away here. So we'll see what he goes ahead and does. Coming up here, but Kahuna also decides to take Caleb Williams, and there you go. Now you've kind of got a run starting on quarterback, so you got to ask yourself here, if you're me, do you take a quarterback, or do you take probably what I think is some of the best value on here? And personally, for me, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to be reaching and taking Cam Scadaboo here. I'm shocked that he fell this far. But at the same time, I know a lot of people aren't as high on him as I am, combined with the injury that we saw. I couldn't be more thrilled to grab Scadaboo here. To be frank, I thought he would go in the 4th round. But, to walk away with Achane and Kyron and Scadaboo, I think I feel super comfortable with the running back room I have here. Obviously, I need to start thinking about wide receivers soon, as it's going to wrap all the way back around to me, and I'm going to be at slim pickings. I still don't have a premium tight end as well, but you know what? We're doing the best we can here. And there you go. There goes Devonta Smith. I think that's a fantastic pick. So you're going to have Devonta Smith go in front of A.J. Brown. Talk about the fallers. T. Higgins goes, and then Baker Mayfield's going to go here. All those are very realistic. To be honest, I'm curious to see what happens in the Dynasty community. If you're watching this and you're this far in, comment on the video here. Let me know. Do you think Devonta Smith goes above A.J. Brown in Dynasty fantasy football startups this offseason? I think there's a really good possibility of it, like you just witnessed it happening here. And to be frank, I wouldn't blame you for doing so. Now, the age difference between them isn't actually as drastic as a lot of people think. It's only a couple of years, so you're really not getting that much younger. In fact, it's really a lot closer to 18 months than it is 2 years. But I think just after the performance we've seen this year, and I think A.J. Brown's going to get shipped in the offseason. So hop in the comments, guys. Let me know what you think. Are you taking Devonta Smith or A.J. Brown in a Dynasty startup today? That's a really interesting one that I think the Dynasty community will be pretty split on here going into the offseason. And we'll see how we get the second half of the season from A.J. Brown. Maybe he really finds his form again, but I'm not sure I'm a huge believer. So now we got Dave Cueto here, and he's milking his timer here. So we'll see what he wants to do. There you go. He goes Travis Hunter. Lovely to see that my man right there is a former Buff, so not necessarily surprised. But some people still have a lot of faith in Travis Hunter. Personally, I wouldn't be touching him with a 10-foot pole, but you guys probably already know me and know that I am not a Travis Hunter lover for fantasy football. I think he's wildly talented in real life, but. Then we get Austin Jones taking Josh Jacobs off the board. That's fantastic. You love to see it. Good value on Jacobs. I mean, I still think you'll get several productive seasons out of Josh Jacobs, at least 2 or 3 more good ones. And to get him at the end of the 5th is great. Now, Michael Walsh is going to be up here any moment, and he's going to go ahead and take his picks. Fantastic value on Jalen Waddle, to be frank. I would have thought Jalen Waddle would be off the board already, but that's great value on Waddle here. And he's going to take his first wide receiver, which is needed for his build. I'm going to hand it off to him in a second to give us some reasoning on these picks anyway, but we'll let him make his second pick here, and then he can chime in on how he's feeling about this build. But he's debating it right now. He's trying to decide. If I'm Walsh here, I'm probably considering taking one more receiver, but at the same time, we'll see. We'll see what he wants to do. Maybe he goes running back and snags a Chase Brown here, or decides to get creative. We'll see what he decides to do with this pick, but he takes Jameson Williams. All right, Walsh, why don't you walk us through kind of your thought process here? I love the build so far. The running back room is stacked. Obviously, Drake May early on, but walk me through the team build so far and give me some context on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I had to take my god Drake in the first round, but Tyler Warren is just one of my favorite players this year. So, especially in a tight end premium league, I just really wanted to grab him real quick. I was really debating on that 3-4 turn, like what to go with, because I felt safer going double running backs because I feel like running backs, they kind of like thin out way quicker than receivers for me. And I feel like you can always get value receivers if you can make the right call on them. So I wanted to grab a couple running backs early just to at least get a secure 2 starters. And then Jalen Waddle was a pretty easy value pick for me there. I was debating on the second one between Addison and Jameson Williams, though. And I just ended up going Williams because I just feel like the quarterback situation is a little more stable there. So I just went with what I thought might have more long-term value.
No, that makes sense, and honestly, I can't blame you too much on it. I think this is a good build, and everybody's executing a pretty solid startup right now, and I like what I'm seeing. Javonte Williams goes off the board, and so unfortunately, these ones are probably gonna be a little less accurate with Derrick Henry going there, but that's okay. We get Caleb Johnson also going way too early, so that might throw a little wrinkle into the board, guys. But you know what? It's okay. It's okay. I'm gonna let it roll. Just for the fun of it. But, as you see here, Chase Brown's probably the most realistic one. So Ken Walker goes off the board there. And to be frank, that's probably one of the directions I was looking. And Jack probably knows that. He's a smart guy. So no worries. I think at this point, it is a tight end premium. I'm not going to lie. Taking Colston Loveland, even though I'm not a huge fan of him, is somewhat tempting here. Now, I still need a second quarterback, so I could go quarterback here as well and not feel too bad about it, as there is a lot of guys who have, fallen this deep. And quite frankly, I know it seems like a reach here, but I am actually going to take Daniel Jones here. And I know it seems like quite the reach, but I'm going to take Daniel Jones over guys like Cam Ward and Jared Goff. And I know it sounds pretty crazy, but he's been one of my biggest risers from this offseason. I think the Colts organization, they're going to push into the playoffs here. And as long as he doesn't collapse like a house of cards, I think he's going to get a pretty sizable extension this offseason, at least in the range of a Sam Darnold or Geno Smith deal that locks him up for the next 3 years on a pretty good offense with a lot of weapons. So, I know that's probably the hottest take of the draft so far, especially having guys like Jared Goff and, maybe even Matt Stafford's having a great year. I know he's a bit older, but, even having Trevor Lawrence on the board and, Kyler Murray, who, the Cardinals are going to move on from, but someone will definitely give him a chance, right? I think Kyler Murray obviously might be a value of the offseason. And so Swaggy actually kind of messes my plans up here. I'm not surprised. He loves to mess with me. And, I was hoping Michael Pittman would actually wrap all the way back around to me here, because I figured some folks would be taking a younger receiver. But Swaggy takes Pittman. No big deal. Was hoping for the stack. But my man knows what to do. No worries, no hard feelings. But I think that's a great pick. That was going to be my next pick. Was going to be Michael Pittman, but, it's all good. Jared Goff goes. And Big Kahuna over here, my resident Detroit Lions fan, was probably dreaming about getting Goff so that he could stack with Gibbs and St. Brown here. But, not everybody gets what they want, So there you go. All right, so Kahuna's on the board. Let's see what he's going to do back-to-back here. Hopefully he can pivot and crank these out. But, Mikey, you end up taking Jared Goff there. Just a necessity pick for you. First quarterback off the board, it's dwindling. I'm guessing that's the reasoning.
Yeah, my pick was originally going to be Daniel Jones, but because you picked him, it was between Goff, Lawrence, and Dak for me. And Goff is just the safest out of the three, so I knew I was going to take a quarterback this pick.
Totally.
Other than that, it depended on who was going to be there.
Yep. No sweat. I totally get that. And I think good value on Jared Goff, honestly. A 6th round quarterback guy who's normally finishing top 10. All right, somebody tell Kahuna we're live. There he goes. We got Trevor Lawrence and Terry McLaurin back to back here. Honestly, pretty damn good value on Terry. He's fallen to the 7th round. Obviously, the season has kind of gotten away from him. So Jordan Addison's going to go here. Great value on Addison. I think he's still one of my guys that I would comfortably take in the 6th round and feel really good about here. And I'm a big Jordan Addison guy. I feel like there's 3 guys I always talk about at this point in the season that I think could be the next, quote unquote, next George Pickens, right? A wide receiver 2 has wide receiver 1 upside for the future. And that would be, Jordan Addison, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle. 3 guys that I think that are definitely viable players that have a chance to rise into a wide receiver 1 role, in the next 2 to 3 years here, and as they hit the prime of their career. So let's see what Swaggy's going to do here, and keep us rolling. But I think those are all good buys, and to get one of them right there is great. So Swaggy's going to take Devontae Adams here, probably a little early on D. Adams, but the wide receiver pool is going down quick at this moment in time. And to be completely frank with you, Devontae Adams is wide receiver 7 right now. And so even if it's only a 1-year rental, that could be a league-winning 1-year rental. So I actually like the value still, even though it seems a bit early. I got him in the 9th round a lot this year. Now at this point, I'm pretty tempted to take another running back or to take another quarterback before the field gets too thin. But since wide receivers are running so much, I feel a little inclined to potentially take a wide receiver here, and I think I'm gonna, and I know it's gonna be a dirty pick, but I'm gonna go back to the DK Metcalf well here. He's posting the worst season of his NFL career, so I know it's not thrilled, it doesn't look thrilling, but just he's such an athletic specimen, and you gotta imagine that whoever comes to Pittsburgh next with the contract insulation that he has as a part of that deal will allow him to at least give you wide receiver 2 upside. So we'll see if that ends up becoming a reality. But yeah, honestly, guys, that pick didn't feel great. It felt dirty. I need a shower after that pick, but it's okay. It was kind of one of those things out of necessity because I hadn't taken a receiver since the 1st round, and I hate drafting too much out of necessity because I like to retool after the draft, but, it's okay. It's okay. The next few we get off the board here, Colson Loveland goes, honestly, great value on that if he ends up being the prospect, the Bears expected him to be, especially in a tight end premium here. Now Sutton and Flowers, obviously these are probably more desperation picks just because the wide receiver board is thinning out so much here. Not bad picks, but just necessity picks. The next one I actually think is one to talk about. Sam Darnold goes here, and above guys like Kyler Murray and Michael Penix and Bryce Young and Matt Stafford even, and I think Sam Darnold. A lot of people love him. A lot of people hate him. He still had that game last week against the Rams where it looked like he was seeing ghosts. So definitely still has his concerns here. But I think he's played well enough in general to, really instill a lot of faith in some Dynasty Superflex managers to say Sam Darnold's on an incredible contract in Seattle. His cap hits just in the 30 million range, and at that point, like, Seahawks, with how good their roster is, they probably have to just run with him. It's one of the best value contracts in football, and hope that he just doesn't have some bad playoff performances. So now Walsh is gonna go with the old guys here, and I want to hear his takes. But obviously you can't. There's no substitute for production, and I think doing a draft in the middle of the season is always a really interesting time to do it because I think we're more inclined to take the guys that are actually going to give us points. As the offseason goes on, people get so excited about rookies and, about young guys that could have potential. But, since we're doing this in the middle of the season, taking guys that are currently some of the top of their positions, Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 15, Matt Stafford, giving you top 5 quarterback production this year. Like I would imagine that's a lot of where these decisions come from. But Walsh, how'd you feel about that? And yeah, you taken based off just modern production and hoping you get another year of this out of them?
Yeah, I mean, it felt a little gross taking Matt Stafford just because we don't know the contract situation, obviously. But I mean, not the contract, but we just don't know if he's going to be here next year. So I wasn't sure on that, but I figured if I can get one more year out of him, I'll be pretty happy. And yeah, I just like the stack with Diggs and May. I feel like they're starting to gel the longer the season goes on, and I think I could still easily get another year, maybe 2 out of Diggs, just depending on how things go. So I got to mix in some bets with my young guys. So
Totally, totally.
I
Yeah,
really
no.
I really wanted Sam Darnold there, to be honest, but he went right before me.
Totally, I get it. And so, Sam Darnold, big riser here. So Travis Etienne goes off the board here from Jonesy. That was a great pick, personally. I probably would have been hoping to get Etienne back on the wraparound for me. At this point, just based off my team need and necessity, I'm going to take Jake Ferguson here. He currently, had a stretch at the beginning of the season here where he was tight end 1 for continuous weeks. He has died off a little bit here, but Dak still loves throwing to his tight ends, and since I didn't have one on the board yet, it felt kind of gross reaching on a Mark Andrews or T.J. Hawkinson, and Evan Ingram's been quite the letdown of the season. So I think I kind of just had to be smart, lock up my situation here, and go ahead and get myself a tight end after I've already have 2 quarterbacks. Obviously there's still some wide receivers on the board I like here. But at the same time, I think the value is just too good on Jake Ferguson for the last of the elite tight ends. So Swaggy's going to shake it up here, and I think this will be an interesting one. He takes Rico Dowdle, and I actually don't think this is that bad of a bet. I haven't done all my startup ADPs by any means yet, so that's not been updated. But I do think that someone's going to give Rico a chance. After how good he's played this year, to potentially be a workhorse back for a year or two, and so I don't think that's that bad of a pick. Obviously, we'll see in the offseason where he signs and how it all shakes out, but that might be a big brain move there. So Swaggy takes Dowdle. He's still only 27 years old, so as you guys have witnessed with guys like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and CMC, you can run a while. And so their Kahuna goes with another big brain move. We've been talking about this a lot in my Discord. I think Mac Jones is going to get a starting job next year, and I think this is an insurance buy. And really good value on what might potentially be a starting quarterback somewhere on a team friendly deal, similar to what we've been seeing out of guys like Geno Smith and Sam Darnold and some of these rentals that end up working out, right? And so then he takes Jaden Higgins. That's the biggest bummer. I'm not gonna lie, I was really hoping he wrapped back around to me so that I could grab him as my 3rd wide receiver, but no big deal there. I think it's all good. There's still guys on the board that I don't mind taking a swing on at the wide receiver position, and Trey Benson's going to go off the board after Jalen Warren. I think that's a little early on Jalen Warren, personally, not to flame anybody, but, Mikey, I'm curious your thoughts on that one. I think he'll definitely still have a role next year, but you never know with these things. So talk to me about Jalen Warren while I make my pick here, and I'll end up talking in a second.
Yeah, so I personally see Jalen Warren as what a lot of people saw um James Conner, what a lot of people thought James Conner was going to be this season. Jalen Warren is going to be a starter next season, and he's put up really, really good production. Like he is currently RB 24. He's still going to be a starter. He's been averaging. It doesn't tell me how much he's been averaging, but he's still putting up 4.36 yards per carry, which is about what he's been at his entire career. He's just going to be a good starting flex option, in my opinion.
Yep. Yep. I got no issue with that. Um, Damn, you know what? This is what's showing with the rankings right now. That Troy Franklin move was incredible. In hindsight, if I had him queued, I definitely would have taken him there. But that is a great move by Jack. So again, guys, like we can say here, just as a learning perspective for myself, obviously, the rankings aren't exactly up to date, but I had two wide receivers here in JSN and DK Metcalf. Getting Troy Franklin in the 9th round would have been incredible value. I mean, Troy Franklin currently sitting as a top 20 wide receiver on a Denver offense that loves to throw the ball, and I think he's going to overtake Cortland Sutton in the next couple of years. So you could have potentially gotten the wide receiver one in Denver in the 9th round. And that's why I think like some of these exercises, even doing this midseason, is great to think about, right? Like, look at the value you're able to get on some of these guys. So if you do any startups early on to start next season, like before people start to catch on and consume too much of the content and, really rewire their thinking as far as rankings go, I think getting Troy Franklin in the 8th or 9th round is just absolutely incredible value. I mean, he's potentially, like I said, a wide receiver one, down the line, and he's got great chemistry with Bo Nix. He's so young, only 22 years old, and sometimes we forget about that with these prospects and write them off too quick, but 22 years old, he has got all the runway in the world ahead of him. So that's super exciting. And I think, just to compare, getting Troy Franklin 2 full rounds after Xavier Worthy, I think is a steal. And so, then we get David Montgomery and J.K. Dobbins and J.J. McCarthy going off the board here. J.J. McCarthy, someone still believing in him. I respect it. I personally couldn't touch J.J. McCarthy with a 10-foot pole, even if he paid me, but, maybe he'll figure it out. Maybe he'll figure it out, right? And then we got Michael Walsh in here. He's about to go back to back, so we'll see which direction he goes. If he stays win now, if he goes a little younger and takes some upside, we'll see where Walsh shakes this one out. To be frank, I'm probably being forced to take a wide receiver at some point here. But we'll see. We'll see what I'm able to get done down the line here. So we'll see. We'll see who wraps back around to me. But still, guys like Matthew Golden on the board, and obviously, if this is a real startup and I'm currently in this situation, I'm probably selling this next pick and trying to get some future rookie capital just so I can take swings on some of the young guys I like coming out in this class. But it's all good. This will just be our best mock as we can do. So Walsh takes Quentin Johnston here. Let's see where he goes. He goes Braylon Allen, and so that's a big brain move there. I think at this point we're probably in the range of, can we project what our next starting running backs are going to be on some of these teams, assuming they don't go and draft a bunch of guys? And then you see it. You see Braylon Allen and Woody Marks go back-to-back here, right? And so that's why, at least to explain my pick a little more that we glossed over, that's why I ended up taking Zach Charbonnet here. I think Ken Walker's in a contract year. The Seahawks do have a lot of cap space, but they also have some guys that they need to focus on and lock up. Charles Cross, their all-star left tackle, who was a former first-round pick, he's a guy that they're going to have to pay this offseason. And you guys know better than I do. Those left tackle deals, they can get expensive, protecting your quarterback's blind side. So, I think, is running back going to be at the very top of their list? I don't know. Do they feel fine rolling with Zach Charbonnet and taking somebody in this draft? Probably. And so is Zach Charbonnet potentially an RB1 next year? I like it. So, Mikey over here is going to take Kyler Murray. And to be frank, if Kyler had fallen all the way down to me, I would have taken him, just because I think at that point, take your swing on a quarterback upside. But I think that's a big brain move, and it works out pretty well here. I think it's great value. So we'll see what David Cueto decides to do here. Woody Marks going at this stage, I could see it. But to be frank, I still don't love it. I just think that as a 25-year-old, second-year player, I don't know if I really see him being super relevant. So obviously 2 of these auto picks get a little skewed here, Mike Evans and Joe Mixon, but who knows? Maybe Joe Mixon signs somewhere next year and he figures out his foot problem, and suddenly Joe Mixon is fantasy relevant again. So those ones are funny. But Matthew Golden going in the 10th round seems about standard here. So we'll see. There's still some guys on the board here that have some upside, and so there's guys I personally don't like, but at the same time, I think just value wise, might be some of your best bets. Guys in that range are going to be Luther Burden, and he is on the board for me here. So these guys are almost laughing and cackling at me, I'm probably sure, over along the way, laughing, saying this guy hates Luther Burden, and he's probably going to have to be forced to take him here. And they're not wrong. I'm damn near forced to take him with how the landscape has ridden out here. Unfortunately, I am tempted to just take another quarterback here and get my third guy. There's not a lot of good options, though, guys. We are slim pickings, so I'm dancing around this one. I'm gonna go ahead and probably take the upside of Baishal Tootin, another guy I didn't love, but at this stage, if Travis Etienne does leave in free agency, it looks like Tootin might get the chance to be the starter next year. So again, I really don't love that pick, just as far as like my own self-worth goes. Like, I am not a Baishal Tootin guy, but I think it's okay to just start stacking running backs here. Now, Jaden Reed was going to be my next pick. So I was hoping he'd wrap back around to me, but Mikey saw it. Smart guy over here. Very smart guy. Some of the smartest guy. He gets Jaden Reed, and I love the pick there. So we'll see who wraps around back over to me and see if I have any other wide receiving options, as my wide receiver core is pretty abysmal, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. I've really, really punted the wide receiving core, and I think part of the reason behind that is I am living in the mode of, like, next draft class has such great wide receiving prospects that I just feel confident in my ability to get somebody I like there. And I know rookies normally don't perform right away, but maybe I can retool a little bit after this draft, right, and make some trades. I have such an elite running back room. So DeAndre Swift goes. That's good value on DeAndre Swift. I know people have a real strong prejudice against DeAndre Swift, but he does continue to be productive every year. And although he's not the flashy and best, name value option, he gets you points. And so that's a great pick right there. Harold Fannin going off the board. Again, this is a tight end premium league, and Kahuna waits a while to get him, but quite frankly, really good value. And so there you go. Some guys start to go. At this stage, dynasty-wise, you'd probably be thinking you got to take Ricky Pearsall here. You guys know me, though, and I am just such an avid Ricky Pearsall hater. I won't do it. And so I will explain one thing. If this is a real league going on right now and I didn't know all the players in it, I would be taking Ricky Pearsall just for pure trade value that I could flip him afterwards, because I do think in your standard dynasty leagues, there will be somebody that values Ricky, and will give you value for him. Now, personally, I am not that guy, so I am not going to take him here simply because of that reason. And I'm going to take Luther Burden, who, again, I don't love, but I think DJ Moore is completely and utterly irrelevant in this offense at this point. And with Rome Odunze having flashes of brilliance here, but also, having a hard time finding a complete, clear level of consistency. I'm going to take Burden just for how I believe the offseason buzz is going to rise around him. Now, I will let you guys know my other pick was going to be Khalil Shakir. I think Khalil Shakir is a guy that, currently sitting at wide receiver 33 still gives you decent production and, is like one of those guys that as a wide receiver 3, that's probably what you need. And I didn't have a wide receiver 3, so, I could have gone either way there. I just think that the ceiling of Luther Burden is probably higher than the ceiling of Shakir. And that's the reason why I went the direction I did. And just for the general market perception, I do think that the folks in the offseason will be talking up, Luther Burden a bit. And that'll give me a chance to flip him during the offseason. And, I'm a modular team builder, guys. I always like to make trades. So there it goes. Kyle Pitts off the board. And hopefully now that we're in the deeper rounds, we can get this ripping a little bit here. So, all right, and so for the folks listening to me, yeah, let's keep her ripping, huh? It's the deeper rounds of this draft. Let's start ripping these picks off here. But we've got, Kyle Pitts, Khalil Shakir does go. that was a good value pick, and Mikey's a Bills fan, so not surprised he ends up snagging him here. We got 3 more rounds to go, so we'll see what Walsh does at the turn here to get us going. And he takes Terrence Ferguson. That would have been my next pick, but of course these guys know me. These guys know me, man. They know me, so they're gonna have similar values to me on some of these guys. No issues. To speak more on Terrence Ferguson, especially in a tight end premium league, Sean McVay traded up to get him. Tyler Higbee's on the way out. Colby Parkinson means nothing to me, and I do think Terrence Ferguson is a great athlete. Played well at Oregon, has all the upside in the world to support an offense like Sean McVay is. So, and then Michael Walsh is going to take Christian Watson. So, he's my resident Packers expert here. Michael, give me a tiny little, a little insight on your Christian Watson thoughts here.
I think, like, ever since even college, he's always been a really good prospect I've been a fan of. I've always thought he had the talent to be a WR1 for the Packers, but he's just been dealing with injuries left and right. And this is just a homer take, and I hope that he's over his injury issues and he actually spends some time getting connected with Jordan Love, and they can actually build a long-term connection between each other so that they can actually start making some plays and he can actually become the receiver I think he can be.
Totally. No, I agree with you. I loved Christian Watson coming out of college actually as well, and it's just been such a bummer to watch all the injuries happen because he is a guy that had a really high ceiling, I believed, and unfortunately was slowed down early and often. So, but hopefully he can find his way. And so this is an interesting one, guys, because there's still people on the board that I like here. That I would be fine taking a swing on. AJ Barner was going to be one of my guys, but, that's okay as well. Like I said, I think what you're seeing on him in Seattle is great upside. Now, here, just to take you through my thought process, I'd probably be looking to get a second tight end and a tight end premium, maybe like an Isaiah Likely or a Gunnar Helm even, a guy who I like. But if you know me well, I love to stack running backs, especially like guys that are going into contract years and have opportunities to be a starting back. And I think Tyler Algier, getting him at value here at the 12.9 is really great. I mean, there's a very good chance that either Atlanta re-sign him and still use him as a goal line back, or he ends up going somewhere and taking a starting job. This is a running back needy league, and it always is every single year with all the injuries. And I think Tyler Algier is one of those guys. And I know it sounds gross, but what if Ramondre Stevenson isn't back in New England and Tyler Algier ends up being the goal line back over there while Travion Henderson works in the passing game? I think that's a lot of upside. What if the Chiefs sign Tyler Algier because Kareem Hunt's aging out and they start using him in the red zone left and right for a cheap deal? There's just sky's the limit with a guy like Tyler Algier. And same thing, Texans. Well, maybe they like what they have in Woody Marks, but Woody Marks is a change of pace receiving back. That's what he was in college, catching passes left and right, and you're seeing a lot of that here. He's not a power back, so could you bring Tyler Algier in and suddenly his touchdown upside is through the roof on a Texans team that doesn't have all the weapons in the world? So I think there's definitely a lot of upside for Tyler Algier. And like I said, if you guys know me well, my strategy in these 11 to 15 rounds is just stack running backs. If you've been doing that this year, you got guys like Rico Dowdle and Rashad White and Ramondre Stevenson even, that all these guys, Tyler Algiers, they're giving you production. They're giving you production. So, Mikey, let's make these picks, guys. Let's keep them rolling. We are almost at the end here. But appreciate you guys rolling with me through this. Let's crank these last 2 rounds as, I don't think people are going to be paying too much attention at this point. So, and then we'll be done here. We'll be done here. But this has been a great draft. Hopefully this added some value for you guys. As you saw here, I kind of watched it fly by without touching on it, but we got Kyle Monangai that went off here. He could be a guy that's a potential starter in the future. So, I think good value on stacking some of these running backs here. And then, you see Tajay Spears go off the board here again. I would have been considering taking Tajay Spears over Algier. I just think that the Titans offense is so gross. I'm trying my best to stay away from them in general, but great value there. Now we get Thornton go off the board and Torrey Horton. Torrey Horton's a guy I would have taken a swing on there. Really like Torrey Horton. And, here, again, I could go either way. I'd probably be looking to take, a Jack Bash or an Isaiah Likely here, or maybe even a Kyle Williams, a guy who I really liked last year. Guys like Rashid Shaheed still on the board, and so since these picks don't matter too much, to be frank, I'll I'll probably go ahead and do that because of my wide receiver room here, and I'll take Rashid Shaheed. So, definitely not the greatest of drafts for my wide receiving core, but Shaheed could have upside. Keon Coleman means next to nothing for me here, and like I said, I still like Kyle Williams. Think he's got upside for sure. On a Patriots team that doesn't have a clear star, and Tony Pollard's honestly great value at this degree too. I think he goes somewhere as a journeyman and signs, and ends up playing a role, in someone's backfield next year. He's definitely looking worse than he actually is in real life just because he's on this Titans team. I think if Tony Pollard was on the Chiefs or something, you'd probably be getting, at least top 21 RB numbers out of him, But either way, we got the picks ripping here. Trey Tucker, Rashad White, these are all good picks. Chris Godwin taking a flyer on him coming back. I got no issue with that. Let's wrap them on up here. Walsh is going to send us home in the final round, and we'll get her done. He takes Tez Johnson. I like it. And Keyshawn Boutte there, at this point, he's just stacking some of these guys with upside. Talk to me a little bit here, Walsh. You like these guys, Tez, Boutte? I like Tez. I think he's got some upside for sure, but how's everybody looking on that?
Yeah, I think Tez has looked pretty good. I mean, in the limited opportunities that he's had a couple like flashy plays. So in the later rounds of this draft, why not take a couple swings on Tez and Boutte, who also kind of looks like one of those just long bomb touchdown guys that you can throw in a flex and cross your fingers on a weekly basis. So just kind of adding the depth pieces here in the later rounds.
For sure. Makes sense. So a bunch of these guys go off the board here. You know what's funny, guys? I did not see a Rondre Gadsden go off the board, and I actually don't even see him listed in the player list here. So maybe he's just too far down the list because I don't see him, and I'm on tight ends. So maybe this was just sleeper glitch. But, he went 6'2", did he? Okay, I missed that. 6th round. Okay, guys, I did miss that. So as you see, he went 6th round up here. That is about what I would expect. There you go. To Jonesy. That's a good pick. So, speaking of tight end premiums, I'm actually going to take Gunnar Helm here. I actually think Gunnar Helm's got some decent upside for the future. I think at this point I'd rather have him over Evan Ingram and Jonnu Smith just from a dynasty perspective. And I could see you taking Elijah Arroyo there. I think Arroyo's got a lot of upside, but I think that just shows you how high I am on AJ Barner to potentially be taking Gunnar Helm. And if you see in some of these tight end premium scoring formats, Gunnar Helm's been giving you some production here. So, it's not been the most shining of glory, but there you go. So we get that going, and I think I'm going to wrap it right there. That looks good. We made it most of the way through here. I think at this point, we're just talking X's and O's, and it doesn't matter. So thank you guys for coming along with this draft. I'm going to talk through some of these teams super quickly, but those of you that are waiting in the Discord, and if you have to go, appreciate you so much for coming through. But the team ends. I felt comfortable with it by the end of it. Actually, pretty comfortable by the end of it. Where do I even do this, Mikey? Oh, right there.
Settings.
I'm just going to pause it. Yeah. Okay. So, but I feel pretty decent actually with how this team came out. Patrick Mahomes, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf, Luther Burden, Jake Ferguson, Cam Scadaboo, Zach Charbonnet, Daniel Jones, Baishal Tootin, Tyler Algier, Rashid Shaheed, and Gunnar Helm. Again, I think the real weakness of this team is obviously the wide receiving core. So definitely during the offseason here, I probably wouldn't roll into the season this way. I'd look to make some retooling moves, whether that is tearing off a Kyron Williams, maybe and moving to a Javonte Williams and getting a Stephon Diggs kicked back to me just so I have some veteran production, to roll into the season with that has more upside than Burden necessarily. But I was comfortable with this, and I think great value on the Scadaboo picks, and I think Jackson Smith and Jigba even at the 1.9 is good value as at this point. Call it a hot take. I'd be taking him over Jamar Chase. I'm going to highlight a couple of these other teams here real quick. Walsh, I liked the build. Drake May, Tyler Warren, 2 young running backs here with upside, and James Cook and Travion Henderson. Jalen Waddle, Jameson Williams always has that upside, boom bust for you, and then he gets good production out of Stephon Diggs. Matt Stafford is the second quarterback, does leave him pretty quarterback needy here. outside of May, but that does tend to happen with people that have the 101. Outside of that, though, stacks a lot of youth that I like. Braylon Allen could have a role as a starter next year. Terrence Ferguson, a lot of upside. So I like that team overall. Next we got Josh Allen, Rasheed Rice, Garrett Wilson, Adunze. This wide receiving core is fantastic. I love doing a wide receiver build, and Jonesy executes it really well here while still getting an elite quarterback. He ends up getting Josh Jacobs here, which is great value. Still has a solid RB1 and gets really good value on Travis Etienne. Gets in his elite tight end in Gadsden here. And so, time will tell if he ends up remaining this elite. I do have my skepticism there just because I do think there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Chargers offense. And I do know at the end of the day, Jim Harbaugh wants to run the football. So I don't know if that'll continue, but still, from a prospect, profile perspective, this is a great take. His second quarterback being Sam Darnold and JJ as the third do give me a little bit of hesitation here. In case something goes wrong, I don't feel awesome about that, but I think the value he was able to get on Etienne, and then stacking some other guys like Marks and Mason Taylor is a guy who I really like down the line. Solid build here. Mikey over here gets Lamar Jackson, Drake London, Quinshon Judkins, and Olave. Love these first 4 picks. These are all my guys. Like guys in Dynasty that I love building teams around. 5'10" on Laporta and the tight end premium I think is fantastic value. Just this year he was going in the 3rd round, and I don't think that was disrespectful. I think obviously the injury is going to allow him to drop a bit in these startups, so probably great value there. Javonte Williams in the 6th, obviously a big riser from the 15th last year, but I still think this is great value, especially if he gets locked up long term. Zay Flowers is wide receiver 3, totally fine there, better than my wide receiving core, but I don't love Zay Flowers as a ton, just from a volume perspective, but he gets the stack with Lamar, probably one of the best options you could have, and then get some flexibility with Shakir, so you love that. AJ Barner's a deep sleeper that I like, and 10th round Kyler Murray, he's one of those guys that maybe he Daniel Jones is it, right, and goes somewhere and becomes productive. So, and then Cueto here, he gets a great wide receiving core. Chase, Lamb, Bo Nix in the 3rd, Barkley as his first pick in the 4th, definitely very good value. The Travis Hunter one's obviously not my favorite, but I've talked at length about why I just don't think that from a fantasy perspective he's the best. Then we got Jordan Love and Cortland Sutton and some depth pieces here to keep him going. Overall, this is my favorite build, but I do think, fantastic top-heavy wide receiver core, and if you ever need to retool in the offseason, this gives you a ton of firepower to do so. So definitely no issues there. We'll go through a couple more of these, and then I'll let you guys go. We got Puka Nacua, Brock Bowers, Abuka, Jackson Dart. Now, Jackson Dart in the 4th round, I would have taken him next year. I think this is great value. He could be one of those, elite Russian quarterbacks of the future. Depends on who becomes the head coach and how he looks with neighbors. And, the Giants always have these question marks, but from what I've seen so far, it's looking swimmingly over there, looking like they're operating swimmingly. We got Abuka here. It's a little early for my taste. I still just have my skepticism with Amika to be able to, maintain a level of production that we've seen this year, especially with guys like Godwin and Evans still probably coming back for another year or two. And then guys like Jalen McMillan waiting in the wing, who I still think has a lot of upside coming out of University of Washington last year and hasn't done anything this year because of that neck injury. Now, Devonta Smith in the 5th round, great value, could be an alpha. This is still a better wide receiving core than what I got, so can't hate on it too much. Ken Walker in the late 6th, great value. I think he gets a Kyron or James Cook style deal this year, and his value spikes. Troy Franklin in the 9th is the best pick of this team's draft for Jack. I think that's incredible value on a potential wide receiver 1. And then just stacking some depth with Iamaner and Mason, and this ends up being a good team. Now, you guys have already seen mine. Swaggy over here, he ends up getting Robinson at the 10, which is great. Justin Herbert, Tet in the 3rd, Kraft. Really even build here, and then gets Purdy in the 5th. I think this is a super solid team. That he stacks 2 vets here for immediate production, and I love this move. Obviously his wide receiver core is a little bit on the older side, but he ends up taking down, so he's got the Pittman replacement anyway, and I still think you get great years out of Michael Pittman here, not to mention Devontae Adams. I'll give you another great year. He hasn't slowed down one bit. Start stacking some running back depth in Dowdle and Benson. And again, if Benson ends up being the starter, this is great value here in Arizona. And Monangai with potential upside. overall, a lot of great drafting from these guys. I'm proud of everybody in this draft. You got Moki next over here going with Trey McBride, taking his elite tight end. Neighbors, Hampton, Pickens gets his win now in McCaffrey. Goff and Addison, two guys I think are great value here. Bryce Young, a lot of upside. Jalen Warren, like he gave you the rationale earlier, still a solid RB2, RB3 to have on the roster. Swings upside to Tajay Spears, great value on Jaden Reed. A lot of really solid teams here, guys. I think finally rounding off with Kahuna, my Detroit Lions specialist. No surprise he gets Gibbs and St. Brown, but following it up with Jonathan Taylor and George Kittle, this is a team that's primed to compete right out of the gate. Then gets Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence at good value back to back, and this is good picks here. In this 5th and 6th round, stacking that quarterback room and then getting an upside play with Mac Jones. Terry McLaurin, a guy that's fallen really deep, obviously because of the injuries this season, but he just signed the extension. Great vet to have on the roster to pair with St. Brown here, and then he still gets a young swing in Jaden Higgins. As we talked about already, I think Fannin was good value here, and Torrey Horton, a guy I still love. Vidal also, he's shown flashes this year. So overall, this is a great mock draft. I hope everybody enjoyed coming along with us here. We're going to be doing a lot more of these on the channel. So make sure you're subscribed, you like, you comment, you tell me which you think the craziest picks on this board were, and which ones you would never do, which ones you loved. And thank you guys so much for the continued support. We'll be bringing you mock drafts almost every single week as we go into the offseason here, and we'll keep you up to date with the best place to be for Dynasty Fantasy Football content over here at Dynasty Price Check. If you haven't already checked out the trade show on this channel, we got a special guest on every week reviewing your Dynasty trades. And if you want to learn how to submit your Dynasty trades, it is simply by joining the Discord. So go over to dynastypricecheck.com, join the free Discord, and you guys can have access to me all week long to ask me your Dynasty trade questions and bounce it off our awesome community. Outside of that, make sure you're checking me out on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and following across platforms. I am streaming live almost every single day for you guys on YouTube and Twitch and TikTok, so make sure you follow on up there. And again, thanks for the continued support, guys. We'll be seeing you again very soon to run it back. And if you're looking for my midseason Dynasty rankings, they'll be on the Discord here shortly. Take care.